The franchise recap is on to season 16. Yep, that one, The Island. Airing September to November 2008, this 9-episode season saw 20 cast members unexpectedly get stranded on the beaches of Panama, playing a very different game, but still for our customary $300,000. The evolution here thankfully turned out to be a one-off, as this was a completely different format from anything that had come prior or would really ever happen again anytime after. No house, stranded on an island, with admittedly a kind of dope treehouse sort of thing to live in, at least maybe would have been kind of dope if it was fully equipped with food and basic necessities. No daily challenges, just airdrops every few days with food and supplies that would eventually be used to build 2 boats and race them to an island where the prize money was at for the finish. There were face-offs every few days where 3 people would be voted in for the right to play for a key, of which there were 8, 4 for each of the eventual finalist boat builders and sailors. The losing 2 of the face-off would then face off again in a vote out. 1 person cast off the island, the other awarded a key to be taken from the player of their choosing. On the casting side, 20 people here and a lot of new faces, with essentially just Rachel and Abram as the lone members of the true old guard of the challenge. Real World Sydney was making their debuts with Dunbar, Kellyanne, Kahutta most notably, but this was very much, the new era of cast members, the second era, if you will. Austin, Key West, Denver, Sydney, and Fresh Meat, those 5 seasons of Real World and then Fresh Meat people dominated the lineup and the storylines. Speaking of, let's get to those storylines. Biggest one was the 2 factions of the cast. There was the family, as they would be known here, Bananas, Kenny, Paula, Johanna, and sometimes Dunbar and Derek. Then there was everyone else, most of whom played along with that crew, but a few very much opposed them and felt their wrath. In particular, Evelyn and Kellyanne, who became fast friends here, were picked on and berated endlessly by Bananas mostly, but others as well within that family group. Emotions were certainly high. Everyone's starving on an island when they thought they were going to be a nice fancy challenge house like usual. So, take that for what it is, but nothing should be excused here. It goes from interesting drama to not that fun to watch on a lot of occasions throughout these 9 episodes, and it's a real dark cloud over the season. Yes, it provides the tension for the epic narrative that unfolds, but at the cost of a lot of instances of bitch or slut being yelled in one of these ladies' faces, which, not great. Before we get to that epic endgame that took place, 2 other storylines moments to call out, one of which would have prevented the rest from ever happening. Abram was here, and boy, was he in his element on that island. He loved it. He suffered some insane wasp bites a couple days in, like dozens and dozens, all over his body when he accidentally stirred a nest while climbing a tree to get fruit. Everyone loved him, having him around to assist. He was the one, again, in his element. So when the second vote out came around and it was Abram or Bananas going home, it was clear who was going to be staying. But then the biggest what if, in my mind, in challenge history happens. They receive a cell phone in the supply drop. Everyone gets 2 to 3, I forget how long. They used to get like 2 minutes maybe on the cell phone to make a quick call home. Abram called his construction company he had started and got pieces of an update that sounded very much like things were a complete shit show. They were blowing a major opportunity and needed him to come back immediately. So against everyone's wishes, outside of the family, Abram pleaded to be voted out. Some did just that. Others still voted for Bananas to leave, but ultimately Bananas was allowed to stay, ultimately goes on to get the first win and launches the GOAT career. That phone call doesn't happen. Bananas goes home as the first or second boot for the 3rd out of 4 times on the challenge. And who knows if or when he gets called back. So the fact that the GOAT of the challenge was nearly the second boot for, again, the 3rd out of 4 times, this is the all-time sliding doors what if moment, Abram getting that phone call. He does stay, though, and eventually the family gets the keys, and Evelyn has to overcome major odds to mount a comeback bid. She bests Tyree and Dan to win a key, stealing it from Bananas and giving us one of the greatest speeches in challenge history in the process.
There's an alliance that has pretty much dominated every decision that has been made. These people play the game with nothing but selfishness, dishonesty, and cowardice. They stomp around this island and bully all the rest of us into submitting to any decision that they'd like to make. Tonight, what I say to you guys, you, your alliance. The members of this alliance are Kenny, Johnny, Dunbar, Paula, and Johanna. And every one of us would be naive to think that we are somehow part of their plans. The truth is, they would stab any one of us in the back for the victory. Now that I'm throwing myself out there, I'm going after your captain. Johnny, I'm taking your key. If you want it back, then you can fight for it and win it back.
The problem was the numbers were on the family's side. They got to kind of set up the games they wanted after that. Bananas got his key back the next round. Then came the final two face-offs and key stealing decisions. Ryan, under the radar, had the chance to break this up. Everyone remembers Evelyn. We'll talk about that in a moment. But Ryan had the chance, too, to break up the family. He gets the second to last key decision, and he could have left two even teams of outsiders in the final boat-building race. But instead, he plays it safe in that moment, or at least he thought, ultimately cost himself any chance at winning by taking Kellyanne's key over Johnny, Kenny, or Derek's. And then comes the one everyone remembers. Evelyn wins the final face-off, 5-person face-off. She wins it, and in an epic heel turn that she definitely regretted almost immediately after crossing the finish line a day later, she breaks bad. She takes Dunbar's key instead of Bananas. She joins Bananas and Kenny and Derek in a super team that would win the whole thing, leaving Paula completely out to dry, which tears my heart up. One of my all-time favorites, Paula. Just to rattle through a couple more moments I haven't mentioned, this season also featured Johanna and Kenny hooking up on the beach, very much cementing the West-Kenny rivalry. Kahutta was just an absolute gem, as he always is. Kellyanne beat Rachel in one unbelievable endurance-style face-off called the Rack, the most Survivor-esque of any of the Survivor-esque immunity challenge on Survivor-style things we ever got this season. And then Derek gave an amazing "this is why we do the challenge" pump-up speech to momentary teammate Ashley during a partner face-off that featured a lot of physicality. Look, there's a pretty awesome and very compelling season here. It's just completely marred by how ugly it got between the two groups and how gross some of the gender politics clearly at play got. And just the fact that production was very much okay and even encouraging of it and focused on it as the storyline. I think you could still have the epic Ev speech, the heel turn, with much less showing of the verbal altercations, and it would still be just as fascinating and as gripping. I put it in the fine tier as much as I think you could argue it belongs much higher. I'm going C+ for now. This is the first time I'll admit this might get changed by the end of this 39-season recap where we see where everything else stands up. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on the upcoming Battle of the Eras season coverage. Tune in tomorrow as we return to glory with the Duel 2.